In the past, a story was told of two young men, Adekunle and Damilare, ambitious teenagers whose dreams stretched far beyond the poverty-stricken lives they had inherited. Sons of a struggling hunter and a weary farmer, they watched their parents toil endlessly, barely scraping enough to survive. But Adekunle and Damilare hungered for more, not just for wealth, but for power, fame, and the kind of life that could silence their hunger forever. As they entered their early adult years, their desire for more turned into an unquenchable thirst. They began to dream of grand houses, expensive clothes, and the respect that came with wealth. They whispered to each other about the stories of people who had made fortunes through mysterious means, and the idea of seeking wealth through unconventional paths began to take roots in their minds. In their desperation, they turned to the forbidden. With trembling hearts and eyes wide with fear and hope, they visited the dreaded village priest, a withered old man with eyes clouded like mist and skin that hung loosely on his bones. He lived at the edge of the forest in a crooked hut, surrounded by skulls, bones, and strange carvings. Whispers claimed he spoke to spirits and danced with shadows, and could walk between the worlds of the living and the dead. The priest said nothing when they arrived. He simply stared at them as if he could see into their very souls. Finally, in a voice like rustling leaves, he agreed to help, but only under one condition. They must stay in the heart of the forest for 7 nights without leaving or speaking to anyone, no matter what they saw ahead. The darkness would try to consume them, the whispers would tempt them, and the shadows would seek to confuse them. But they had to remain steadfast. On the 7th day, they would each offer a sacrifice and bathe in the river of whispers, an ancient hidden stream deep within the woods, where the waters were said to carry the secrets of the forest and the whispers of the spirits. The boys scoffed at the simplicity of it. 7 days in the forest, they had camped there before. It sounded like an adventure, a test of their bravery and resolve. And so, without telling their families, they set off, each holding a flask of water, mats woven by their grandmothers, and the talisman the priest had handed them, carved from the bone and bound with red thread, warm to the touch, and humming faintly with something they could not name. At dawn, they slipped into the forest, joking and pushing one another, trying to mask their fears. But the forest was not as they remembered. The deeper they went, the quieter it grew. Birds fell silent, the trees seemed to lean in closer. Shadows moved even when the wind did not blow. By the time they reached the priest-marked cycle, a ring of black stones etched with strange symbols, they no longer laughed. The forest felt alive, watching, waiting. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, the forest truly woke. As they settled into a small clearing under the crescent moon, a strange heaviness fell over them. The forest, which had always been alive with sound, grew eerily still. Even the crickets dared not sing. The air turned thick, and then the trees began to murmur, softly at first, then louder, speaking in tongues that boys could not understand. It was not wind, they realized. The trees were speaking, watching, and then she came. She stepped into the clearing without a sound, radiant and impossible. Her skin glowed like morning sunlight, kissing the surface of a calm river. Her hair flowed like smoke in the breeze. Her eyes shimmered like molten gold. She was beauty incarnate, terrible, hypnotic, divine. She sang. Her voice was not loud, but it rang deep inside their chests, inside their bones. A lullaby from some ancient place, too old for language. She called them by their names, one after the other, in tones their mothers never used, promising them pleasures and riches beyond their imaginations. She held out her arms. She wept, smiled, beckoned. Damilare, strong, skeptical, loud. Damilare walked halfway to her before Adekunle caught him, dragging him back into the cycle, gripping him until he came to. Damilare trembled, his eyes wide, as if waking up from a dream he didn't want to leave. Whatever you see, it is not real, Adekunle whispered, repeating the priest's warning like a mantra. But it only got worse. On the second night, they awoke to find their camp rearranged. Their mats had moved, their water flasks were gone, and the black stones that marked their safety were now scattered like dice. The trees loomed closer, their trunks twisted in ways they hadn't been before, and it appeared, a burning figure, headless, its body smoldering with flames that gave off no heat. It stood in the silence at the edge of their vision, watching. When they blinked, it was gone, sinking into the earth as if swallowed. The third night brought voices, familiar ones, their mothers calling, crying, screaming. The boys turned to the forest and saw them, bent, bleeding from their eyes, stumbling barefoot through the thorns, reaching out, "Help us, please!" But even in their horror, the boys remembered the priest had warned them. Still, Adekunle dropped to his knees, weeping, tempted to run. The boys wept, but held each other in trembling fear, their bodies shaking like leaves. On the fourth night, Damilare disappeared for hours, only to return in a trance, his eyes rolled back, speaking in a voice that was not his own, saying, "The forest wants blood." His words sent shivers down Adekunle's spine, and for a moment he wondered if his friend had been taken forever. On the fifth night, they could no longer sleep. The moon turned black as coal, the stars vanished from the sky, and the shadows danced in circles around them, whispering secrets about each other's betrayal, their whispers like venomous darts piercing their minds. On the sixth, the trees began to bleed, real blood. It dripped from the bark, pulling on the ground, and something walked just beyond the firelight, something that watched but never stepped forward. Its presence felt like a cold breeze on the back of their necks. By the seventh night, they were hollow, their minds fraying like threads pulled from a worn cloth. They followed the priest's final instructions, their legs trembling as they walked. They found the river of whispers, hidden behind a wall of twisted roots that seemed to grasp for them like skeletal fingers. The river flowed silently, its waters black as night, and they could feel its power calling to them, drawing them closer to the sacrifice that would change their lives forever. As they prepared their sacrifices, chickens they had carried with them, the river refused to move. Its waters stagnated as if waiting for something more. Then came the final twist. Each had been chosen to be the other's sacrifice. It was the final test. The spirits demanded blood, not of beasts, but of brotherhood. The realization hit them like a storm, and for a moment they forgot the promise of wealth and power. They looked at each other, and the bond of friendship trembled on the edge of a blade. In a sudden twist of fate, a box overflowing with glittering treasures suddenly materialized before them. The riches they had longed for had finally arrived. Their dreams were unfolding exactly as they envisioned. With hearts full of joy and renewed vigor, they strode purposefully towards the village. When they emerged from the forest, weakened and hollow-eyed, they expected to be greeted as heroes. They imagined laughter, songs, and warm embraces from their kin. But what met them instead was a world unrecognizable. The once familiar footpaths had turned to wide paved roads. The sounds of birds and market chatter were drowned out by the growls of metal beasts that roamed the streets. Cars, monstrous and fast, bare huts and palm-thatched roofs once stood. They were now towering glass structures. The earth was gone, replaced by smokes and machines. A man with silver hair and a glowing glass device strapped to his wrist screamed at the sight of them. Children fled, alarms bled. It was not homecoming, it was exile. Confusion turned to horror as they were cornered by uniformed strangers speaking clipped, unfamiliar tongues. In truth, the forest had obeyed a different rhythm, a time outside time. What had felt like 7 nights in its heart had been 70 years in the world they once knew. Their village had been swallowed by progress, their families long dead, graves buried under concrete. The gold they clutched, once so heavy with promise, was now nothing more than trinkets, obsolete artifacts of a forgotten age. Their dialects, once rich and rooted in culture, now sounded alien. Their clothes, torn and feral, made them appear like some beasts returned from a primal exile. To the people of this new age, they were not survivors, they were madmen, dangerous relics raving about spirit trials, blood rivers, and time-warping trees. They were sedated, studied, and confined in a sterile, white-walled mental institution, labeled as delusional. Now they sit side by side, staring through barred windows as the sky changes above them. They no longer speak, but sometimes in the dead night, they both turned suddenly together towards the trees visible just beyond the hospital wall, because still the forest whispers their names.